Hey everyone, welcome to today's video on looking at three-digit numbers and this idea of how we can show them in these three forms, our standard form, our word form, and our expanded form. So this is really about this concept of like, how can we read and write these three-digit numbers and reflect them in these three different forms, right? So if we're talking about a three-digit number, again, keep in mind that means that is a number composed of three different digits, meaning we would have the ones place, we would have the tens place, and we would have the hundreds place. So three-digit numbers go into the hundreds. An example of that might be 392. So we're going to talk about, for example, how could we take this number 392, read it and write it, and reflect it in these three different forms? So I say we just dive in and play with that. Let's go. We already have it, 392. So make things start off with standard form. That is standard form. So standard form is really when we just write it with the digits. Excuse me. Let me clean that up. So when we're talking about 392 in standard form, it is written with the digit 3 in the hundreds place, 9 in the tens place, and 2 in the ones place. 392, that is standard form. Now what's great about that is when we can look at a standard form number and we can read it, right? When we say that number, we read it out loud, it actually gives us the answer for the word form. That's where these are really connected, which is great. Because if I read, and again, I say 3 in the hundreds place, and then 92, so 392, I can write that in word form, which is literally using my words. So I'm going to say 392. And there's my word form, right? So we've already taken care of two of the forms. Standard form is with the digits. When I read those digits aloud to myself, I can just write down what I'm saying, and I now have my word form. Good thing about word form too is, like, yes, spelling is important, but keep in mind in a lot of the assignments, you will have a resource that will show you the spelling of all of these. So don't sweat as much about figuring out how to spell it correctly, but just go and look at the resource so that you know how to write down and copy 100 if you're worried about how to spell it. So that's all good. All right, so here we have our standards and our words. So let's play with those a little more and kind of go back and forth. So I'm going to start with a word form of a three-digit number. I'm going to say 703. So as you can see, I've written this in word form. So we're going to convert that or change that into our standard form. Now, one thing that really helps when thinking about standard form is if we are working with three-digit numbers, I'm going to just write 3 blanks, right? Because I know, again, I have my ones place. I'm going to use an O for that, my T for my tens place, and H for the hundreds place. And I can kind of think about, well, what would go where when I read this? So when I first look, I see 700. It's the first thing that I see. That tells me there's a 7 in the hundreds place. And then what's left is just 3. Well, if I had to write down the number 3, it's 3. It's 3 ones, right? I could model that in base 10. It would just be 3 ones, which tells me in the ones place, there's a 3. And I didn't really hear anything about a 10. So that just must mean it has to have a 0, right? Because I have to fill that place value. So this would be the standard form. So this is how we can go back and forth between standard and word. Okay, so let's do another one. Let's put something in standard form first, and then how could we write that as a word? I'm gonna say, let's say 429, right? So again, this is that whole concept. Like, how do we read this word? Well, we read the first digit we see, we say its place value, and then we just read the next number. And we kind of lump those two together, right? That's the tricky part. So again, if I read this, 429, and then I have 29 left. So again, what I say out loud, I can write as a word, 429. So I'm gonna write that down, 429. And there is my word form. Okay, so we kind of think about what we're looking at. Again, the gift that math gives us in this situation is that if you can read the number, you can write the number. And I really always suggest read out loud to yourself, hear yourself say the number, and then just write down the words that you are hearing yourself say. Okay, so that was standard and word. We kind of like talked about those two and lumped those two together and how they're connected. Let's now talk about expanded form. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over here, and we're going to talk about this idea of expanded form. Now, to be expanded, right, if you think about that, expanded means to, like, I guess in a sense, like pull out or grow, if you will. I don't want to say it gets bigger because our numbers won't change. They won't get larger in value, but the way that we write it will take up more space. It will expand. Trying to think of a good example with that. And honestly, the only one I can think about is when I eat way too much food. I definitely feel like my body expands, right? But it's not like you get bigger. It's just like it's taking up more space. I don't know. Anyway, so let's think about what that means. So I'm going to take a number and I'm going to write it in standard form first, because that's where we need it. If we have a number in standard form, we can write it out in expanded form. All right, so standard form, I see the number 381. Now, expanded form is really about writing down the values of the numbers in each place value. If you remember from like our addition using a place value, right? If I used a base 10 model of this, which I will, I have my ones, I have my tens, and I have my hundreds. What we're going to do is, like, again, I can model this out. There's a 1, 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tens, and there's 300s. This is what it would look like as we model it. And really, expanded form means I'm going to take each one of these values and just write them out on their own. So this is 300, right? 100, 200, 300. This is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And this is just 1. So if I'm going to write 381 in expanded form, I would say it's 300, that's the value of the 3, plus 80, that's the value of the tens place, plus 1. So that's really what we mean by when we go expanded to standard or standard to expanded, right? We're drawing out the value of each digit. So let's play with that a little bit more. All right, let's look at another one. Let's see, 754. Okay, so again, we're drawing out each one of these place values and how much it's worth, and then we write it down. So I'm going to start here. That's a 7, and that's a 7 in the hundreds place. This is actually where multiplication comes in handy, because this is 7 groups of 100, right? So that'd be like skip counting by 100 7 times, which would get me 700. Notice how all these skills are like connecting and relating. It's really cool. So I have 700. And then in here, right, this is 5 groups of 10. So that's 50. And then 4 ones. So this is my expanded form. So this is how we write numbers in expanded form. We just draw out the value of each one. Let's do another, because I just feel like, you know, it helps to see more than one example over and over again. 437. So again, here we go. I'm going to say we have 400, because that's the hundreds place, plus 30, because that's the tens place, plus 7, because that's the ones place. And again, here is my expanded form. So let's put all of this to practice, right? Let's put it all to practice. I'm going to start with expanded. I'm going to write a number in expanded. I would really, after I write that, I encourage you to then write it in standard. So that's one of these like pause the video moments and solve. And then once you have it in standard, can you write it in Word? Okay, so let's try that out. So if I'm expanded out, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say 300 plus 60 plus 7. Okay. All right. So there's the expanded form. If we wrote that in standard form, we've put these values together. Oh, and by the way, hopefully you pause and solve this. And now you're coming back, right? And if you haven't, pause now and then go do it and then come back. Welcome back. You paused it. You solved it. Okay. So expanded. So we have 3 in the hundreds place, 6 in the tens place, 7 in the ones place. So 367. Oh, what? 367. Oh, 367. Awesome. So that's really where we can put all of these together. Expanded, each place value drawn out. Standard, just the digits all put together to make the 3-digit number as we see it all the time, like the most common way we see it. And then word form, 367. So let's just play around. Let's just do one last one where we're going to kind of look at them all. So we're going to go, I'm going to start with word, then go to standard, and then go to expanded. Okay. So again, this is one of those, once I write the word form down, pause the video, solve the rest, and then unpause and see how we did. So word form, I'm going to say 780. Okay, got tricky. So go try that out, 780. Okay, welcome back. All right, so one of those things we said again, we're working with 3 digits. So we definitely know that if I want to write it as a standard form, I could put 3 blanks because there's, again, the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place. And if I first read my number, it says 700. And then the second number I hear is 80, 80, 80, 80, 80, 80. Sorry, you guys like keep thinking about that number. To me, I see that that's it, 8 tens, because 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And then I can't just leave the ones place empty. That doesn't make sense, because then I'd only have a 2-digit number. It'd say 78. Right now, 780 does not look like the standard form of 78, so I would need a 0 here. Now, if we're going to expand this out, well, that's 700 plus 80 plus 0. And there we have it. Okay. So here is the work that we're doing. This idea of how can we write these words in their 3 different forms? How do we read them? How do we write them in these 3 different forms? Meaning word form, so using words, standard form, writing it as digits, and expanded form, where we show the value of each place value. Okay. This will take practice, no worry, keep it up. As always, ask questions. You know, that's one of our math norms. So always ask questions till things make sense. Keep up the great work. As always, thank you for being here, and we'll see you soon.